Hi, and thank you for joining us on our very first episode of Yap and Doodles. Today we'll be discussing hypnosis, as talked about in 40 studies that changed psychology, explorations into the history of psychological history. Hypnosis is a topic often overlooked in conversations around mental health and psychology in general. Like many, I myself didn't consider hypnosis to be a credible topic in those conversations either. It appears that there's a stigma that the topic carries, and while that may be the case, there's someone who wanted to test just how valid hypnosis is by scientific standards. Nicholas Spanos was a psychologist who took great interest in hypnosis. He theorized that hypnosis was a social behavior and not some altered conscious experience. Spanos centered studies around proving or disproving his theory. He emphasized that acting under hypnosis was merely an increased motivation to perform certain behaviors. In the 18th century, mental health crises were interpreted to be spiritual plagues. A man by the name of Franz Anton Mesmer actively used hypnosis as a treatment for these plagues. Mesmer interpreted these mental health crises to be attributed to a fluid imbalance in the body. While some of his interpretations may not hold up today, we still talk about him because his treatments worked. Many of his patients showed significant improvement after receiving hypnotic treatment. Spanos worked to prove or disprove that hypnosis was not an altered state of consciousness, but rather a social behavior that was performed due to increased motivation. In one experiment, Spanos was very selective with his language. Rather than giving directions, he used suggestive language. Instead of directing subjects to raise an arm, he would instead say, "You're raising your arm." And what happened? Despite not even undergoing hypnotic inductions, participants displayed the suggested behaviors. Participants who thought that hypnosis would cause them to act outside of their own volition took the suggestions despite not having been hypnotized. They expected to lose control, and thereafter concluded that they had. These participants behave so that their behaviors match their expectations. Today, psychologists discuss hypnosis as a practice rooted in perception and consciousness. Even so, the validity of hypnosis is still questioned. Hypnosis continues to carry a negative stigma and be overlooked. Nicholas Spanos managed to investigate hypnosis by scientific means and do away with some of that stigma. If asked how valuable these studies are, I would say this. There are many realms where belief, expectation, suggestive language, and social influence all matter. Those are the building blocks of hypnosis. What were to happen if these elements were intentionally in spaces like education? How would that influence our children, for example? How about marketing or entertainment? Could elements like suggestive language and social influence impact behavior on a mass scale? What about in media literacy? How many of us consume media with consistent messaging? Whether it be influencers, politics, music, movies, art, does consumption of these forms of media affect our belief and behaviors? If hypnosis is merely social influence and increased motivation, as Spanos surmised, then it's interesting to question to what scale can hypnosis be effectively used? How impactful is it? How relevant is it really? An example is the Stanford Prison Experiment. Participants in this infamous study displayed how roles and social influence shape human behaviors in a very real, sometimes degrading and dangerous way. Participants in this study behaved as they thought was fitting to the authoritative and submissive roles they were given, just as in Spanos' studies, where participants adopted behaviors they thought fitting to be hypnotized. So does Spanos' study depict a consistent pattern of human behavior when paired with belief and social expectations? When thinking of the value of these studies in today's day and age, it's reasonable to consider how relevant these studies may be. If hypnosis is merely social expectation paired with belief or increased motivation, then how does this change how we view influential and authoritative figures? Consider vulnerable populations like children, or those who don't have access to education. Are they more susceptible to social pressures or propaganda? Would such influences shape their behaviors at a greater level, or are we all equally susceptible to these influences? The value of Spanos' experiments is not lost. It's clear that belief, expectation, and social influence are tools that can have great impact. The studies are valuable to anyone interested in how social influence and motivation affects behavior. They help us to understand what qualifies reality for individuals and how belief, influence, and expectation can impact that perception. Spanos' framework grounded our perception of hypnosis. His findings made it so that we can understand hypnosis through a scientific lens. In doing so, Spanos proved that hypnosis does qualify as a very real answer to questions of psychological conditioning. Maybe there is something to hypnosis after all. Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining today on Yap and Doodles.